Welcome to the Catholic Table Talk podcast. This is where everything Catholic is on the table. New episodes Thursdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on most podcast platforms. Here's your host, William Sauber.
All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us here at the table, like it should be, old-fashioned way at Catholic Table Talk Podcast. We're on location again. I love being on location. We're in St. Francis Catholic Church in Braden, Minnesota. So if you're in the Braden Lakes area, please make sure you visit. It's a beautiful church. My family and I visit it very often. It's a great place to worship God. Great people, very nice, from the pastor to the maintenance custodial staff, the office people, to anyone that you see in the church pews. They're very gracious, outgoing, generous, and they're letting us use this room for free today. So just thank you for Braden Catholic and especially St. Francis Catholic Church for being our host today. Really appreciate working with all of you here. Another great parish and the ACC we're going to talk a little bit about today is the Crosswalk ACC. They're based out of Weiss and surrounding areas. That's also a really great parish because I was in a wedding at the Immaculate Conception in Weiss a few years back. So it's a very beautiful parish, and we have one of the ACC staff with us again today. He was on last year talking about what he kind of does, and now he's back with he's back in his I think he likes his role at the director of evangelization for the Crosswalk Catholic area ACC. Let's put it that way, sure. And his name is Tony Miller. Again, we've been friends for 8 years now, and just a little bit more about him. He led our student road trips a few years back. Him and the team that he was working with was gracious enough to let us go with him. And we've been keeping in touch ever since, and we've become really good friends through the Catholic faith and just having respect for one another. So without further ado, let's welcome back to the show, Tony Miller. Tell us about what kind of the ACC, what changes the ACC has made with faith formation.
Yeah, the director of evangelization role definitely has a lot more components to it. And so I'm new to that position. When I first come on with the Crosswalk ACC, I was asked by Father Greg Paffel to come in and be the DRE for one of the parishes out of one of the 5 that they have there, and to come in as being DRE and then also the youth minister for the ACC. And then a couple months after that, there was some restructuring and some things that Father wanted to change. And he asked me to be through the interview process, he asked me to come on board and be the director of evangelization. With that being said, his first task for me was to help and take over and quote unquote fix the faith formation program. And I say that fix the faith formation program because what we had going on in our parishes, so we're in our ACC, our area Catholic community, we have 5 different parishes, 5 different programs, 5 different approaches, 5 different things going on. Nobody was unified. Nothing was working together. The only thing we were doing together was confirmation, and that was partially because we couldn't do it all together in one of our parishes, so we had to go to the cathedral in St. Cloud. But we weren't all on the same page even then. So what Father had asked me to do was help with the faith formation and figure out what we were doing going forward, because with the all things new that we have going on in our parishes, or in our diocese, they're going to close down 2 parishes, and the 3 remaining parishes are going to consolidate into one parish with 3 different sites. So what Father wanted me to do was to figure out what that faith formation program looked like. So I went to work and I got some representation from each one of our existing parishes, and I put together kind of a committee to help me figure out what the faith formation program was going to look like moving forward. So what we did is we started looking at different curriculums, different approaches, different things that were going on through this process, all talking about the different things that they had going on in their own parishes that they were a part of. And as a group, we come together with a mission statement of what we were going to use to help filter our decisions through. And the gist of the mission statement was to support the families deepen their relationship with Jesus Christ. And so we wanted to, we looked at the baptismal promises that parents would take with their kids at baptism to be the primary teacher of the faith. And so that's what we wanted to do, is we wanted to help empower the parents to take that baptismal promise that they had made and emphasize that to help them with their faith and going forward with the faith formation program. So we are looking to go to a family formation model from the traditional classroom model. What we were seeing a lot of was a lot of drop and go, where a lot of the parents would just drop their kids off and go, and then come back in an hour and a half later and pick them up. So we were getting a lot of kids that didn't want to be there, kids that just, I mean, a lot of behavioral things, a lot of things that I'm sure any catechist can tell you all about, a lot of the traditional things that you would see that you don't want to see. But so the idea of what we're going to as the family formation model is we are looking to go to meeting in a large group setting in church once a month, where the parents will be able to come in. They'll come in as a family. The parents will take their kids to a classroom. 1st through 6th is the years that they're doing this, grades 1st through 6th. The kids will go to a classroom, and then the parents will go to the church or a place where they can all gather, and they'll all gather together, and they're all going to be taught something that goes in line, that is parallel with where the church is at in the liturgical season. And they're going to go over something, and they're going to get that topic, whatever that is of the night, something at their level. So for the parents, it'll be something definitely a little deeper. For the younger kids, 1st, 2nd grade, it'll be something that'll be, more at their level, maybe some activities and stuff like that to kind of go through some of those things. But then that night, they're also going to get a packet with lessons in it that they're going to be able to take home and go through together as a family, and to help empower the family or the parents to be more of that domestic church, that family piece. And the idea is that we're looking to help equip the parents to pray together, hopefully daily, dive into scripture more, weekly or more if they need to, and just kind of help with the traditions of the faith and to kind of take interest in that more. And then also through that, maybe coming back and attending mass more frequently, visiting the sacraments more frequently, but being able to do that as a family together, and with the parents being the primary teacher of the faith, also being the bigger influence of the faith to help them develop that and see the importance from the parent being the example for the kids, for the students, to develop that and see the need and the reason for the importance of deepening their faith.
Wow. So a lot going on, which, I mean, like we talked before, Gemini, I mean, it's all like, to me, that's what you need. Because like you said, people just drive by and then they go and they walk the dog, or they go and do stuff, and they go home and watch TV even. They don't have interest in their faith as well, and the kids take after that as well. But I'm gonna throw an oddball question at you right away, Tony. I'm sorry for this, but okay. So because I've heard like other parishes do the same thing. They have a big kind of family night, and yeah, kids go off, but you have the same topic. I guess my question is, how do you how can you get people engaged in that if they're not really serious about their faith anyway? because a lot of people might be like, yeah, family night. Okay, what do you have? Games, food, Oh, we're going to talk about the faith. Okay, well, we got 15 minutes and we'll be done. But how, and I know like I said, I'm just kind of throwing this out there at you, but how did you think of that? How did the team think of that? Of like really keeping parents around and keeping parents, I guess, how making them attracted to it.
Yeah, so I think getting the parents involved is going to be key with the kids, and I think that's going to help with the kids wanting to be there and be involved. And it's not just going to be like a lecture style. I mean, the idea is to help the families interact, and there's going to be time for fellowship, for working together, being able to do things together. And some of the other things that I envision with how this is going to go, where the kids we can have like a youth group night where it can be just like youth group stuff, where we can have the parents being able to go and maybe socialize with each other, where some of the adults and some of the coordinators and volunteers can take the kids over and we can do youth group activities. We could do some of those things to help introduce them to youth group kind of stuff. So that way, when they are old enough to be involved with that stuff, it's something they can look forward to. But then also, on the other hand, to help them get excited, which we're hoping will help the parents be excited about taking them to those kinds of things and being involved in those kinds of things. Part of with me wanting to have a group together, a committee, I didn't want to make these decisions myself. And that was something else that we took into consideration as a group or as a team talking about these things, that we were trying to figure out what we were doing, and coming at it from all different kinds of angles to try to help out and to meet the parents where they are and to help get them more involved in church. So whether or not it being the picture perfect family where you've got a mom and a dad and a son and a daughter, and it's just the four of them, to being the maybe single mom with one or two kids, or, but being able to help them walk in their faith and be excited about their faith and help them get involved in their faith. And the other thing about the packets going home with the parents is also being able to do it where they're able to do it on their time. So, and personally, what I would like to see is more, because we've gotten away from this so much, is meals together. What if it was something simple enough where it was just sitting down and having a meal together, and then instead of awkward silence or the kids playing on their phones or whatever the case is, they could actually be looking at going through a packet and looking at it and talking about their faith. Why did Jesus do this? What happened in Genesis? Which is, just these different things, these different topics that could be going through, like I said before about, maybe opening the scriptures to figure out some of those things, maybe reading some of the stories, learning out about who some of these characters are, maybe what Jesus all did, those different kinds of things. But maybe helping just stem those conversations or something to spark those conversations that they together as a family can talk about. And I'm hoping that through some of that stuff, it'll help both of them get excited about their faith and deepen their faith.
I like that. Because basically, at least I've heard please talk about this too, because like Sundays at brunch or Sundays at lunch, you're supposed to talk about maybe the readings for that Sunday, and a lot of people don't. So I like what you're saying. That's what you should be doing, and the faith is about like being open about it and discussing it instead of going to your bedroom and praying and that's out and keeping it to yourself. So I do like that. Yeah, I think that would make it more Christ-centered and more involves the whole family. And then can you just briefly explain one more time, like how did you guys find this content that you're following?
That's actually kind of a funny story. One of those things that may be divine intervention, or just coincidence, whatever you want to call it. But so after taking over the director of evangelization, and sitting in this new position, I started looking into curriculum. I started, like what's all out there, just trying to get an idea, because I've been out of ministry for a couple years, and well, more than a couple years, but just trying to get an idea of what's there, what are the options. And it was addressed to one of the parishes, but not me specifically. Obviously, I hadn't been in the position long enough, but it was a come and see event where we were able to, it was an invitation to our parish to come check out this family formation model and to see what it looked like. It was one of those things that, like, I just kind of put it off to the side, and it's just like, just a piece of mail, just whatever, So I just kind of put it off to the side of my desk. I didn't throw it away or anything, but but then as I got deeper into some of the stuff that I was looking at, the classroom models, the family faith, the family formation models, just the different things that are out there, some of the stuff being all online, interactive, like some hybrid stuff is what they were calling it, where it's kind of both at home and in classroom. And, some of these different kinds of things, I ended up going back to that postcard that I got and looking at it and just kind of going on their website and just kind of looking more at it. And then as I was talking to some of the people that ended up being part of my committee to help with this, asking them about it. Is this something that they would be interested in? Would you want to go see it just to check it out? I mean, no commitment or anything like that, but just to kind of look at it. And we ended up going to look at it. Out of the 5 parishes, all of the representation from each one of the parishes, except for one, we're all able to go. So the 5 of us went down there and we checked this out, and they immersed us in their program. They had us working with the parents. We had a couple of our team go to a couple of the classrooms, so they got to see how the classrooms were working. We got to go with the parents to see how the overall the session went. They had their deacon come out and do a talk about, the time we were there was during Lent. So the deacon, the theme of the day we were there were the Stations of the Cross. And so the deacon of their parish was talking to us about how he meditates on the Stations of the Cross. And that was what the adults got for their part of their topic for the session. And the kids were doing other things to do with the Stations of the Cross. But then afterwards, they had the kids come out and they rejoined their parents. And then we actually, as a whole, we all did the Stations of the Cross together. Kind of a cool thing. And the other thing that's kind of neat is it's kind of in our backyard. I mean, little south from us, about an hour and a half or so south of us, but it is the family formation model by the Church of St. Paul in Ham Lake. I'm just saying that. I'm not getting paid by them. Maybe I'll have to send them a bill or something, but as a promotional piece, but that's just who we happened to go with. And it was one of those that we happened to first look at, but a lot of the things that as we were going through and filtering our decisions through our mission statement that we come together as a group, it kept coming back to that model. And that was just the way it worked out. It was being more supportive of the families and helping them be that primary educator of the faith. And a lot of the things that were through this model were all lining up with what we were liking and going in that direction.
Awesome. No, it sounds like it's something that a lot of parishes should get because, like you said, I mean, just going back to the parents just really falling like Catholics. We're going to get into this in the next question, but just kind of losing the faith and not interested in the faith, and no one was really, they didn't have a good enough lifestyle or parents to teach them in the faith, and then they put it all on the church. And sometimes the way the church teaches, well, first of all, like you mentioned before, it's not really the church's responsibility to teach all of it, right? And the church doesn't really do a great job in teaching it. Just going back to what a good friend of mine, good friend of the show, what he said is like catechesis back in the 70s were really bad. That's just the way it was. That's kind of known. Now we're going to turn into this big revival that's happening across the country. Now it might be because of, people might be interested in Eucharistic possessions and all that. And they're like, what is that? That way. But for the younger people in the revival, there's just a great big revival happening, and it has been for the past year or so. Why do you think that is? I guess if I could get your personal opinion, because I value it.
Yeah, I think there's something with the faith, and I think there's some. I think a lot of the youth are seeing that and realizing that, maybe not knowing what it is, but I think there is something. They sense there's something there. I think there's something that they're looking for, and they're looking for some authenticity. And I think they're seeing that with some of the people with, that are involved in the church, what they do, maybe how they are, how they act, just some of those things. And so we actually had a young lady who, well, actually two, we had a young man also come through the OCIA program for our church, who were going to religious ed with their classmates while they were going through OCIA. And so praise God, they were just inducted into our Catholic family at the Easter Vigil this last year. But I think a lot of that has to do with that authenticity of their classmates, and, going to Steubenville, being involved in those kind of youth conferences and sharing their faith with their friends around them. And I think having that camaraderie and that fellowship with those around them, that they saw that, and they saw or sensed some sort of value in that and wanted to know more about it. And so I think that kind of invited them in, and I know our parishes aren't huge compared to some, but I mean, we definitely have, and like you said, across the country, we've seen an incline in that. And I think that's, just helping with that surge is having those kids experience Jesus Christ at a deeper level, experiencing his presence, experiencing him, and that authenticity, like I said, at like Steubenville youth conferences, or, even in our parishes, amongst people who are devoted Catholics, who aren't afraid to show their faith or to live their faith. And I think that is important for those kids to see, and that's helping them want something more. And I think that's where a lot of that is kind of coming from, is that they want something, and they don't know where to find it. So they're looking for that. And that's kind of where they're seeing, because they're feeling that, that acceptance.
The thing about your ACC, Tony, is like it's kind of the location, and it's actually in a nice cluster. But right next door you got St. Cloud and the whole they call suburbs of St. Cloud. So I mean, just how many more people are you can kind of draw on to that if you live out your faith, and people are like, what's that church in Weiss, and this person's from Weiss and he's so cool and he's a Catholic. What's that about? So it's like the big market's right there. And now I know like it's diocese of St. Cloud, so of course you got the cathedral and multiple churches. I'm not saying there's no Catholic existence there, but I mean the diocese of St. Cloud, especially in the St. Cloud area, is like number 2 or number 1 leading satanic stuff happening in the USA right now. It was at the men's conference of the Diocese of St. Cloud, but it's actually there's either one or two. I'm sure Jay Taylor, who was there with me, is going to give me trash now that I don't remember, but it's the top 2 of the satanic you know rituals, of course, in the country. Presence, yes. So yeah, it's definitely needed to have people look for the truth and see it in the Catholic faith, in the Catholic Church in the surrounding area, instead of seeing the satanic stuff happening, which again, Catholics might be like, well, where is that? We don't see it. But if it's if it's in the top 2 in the country, it's probably happening out your back door somewhere. Could be a neighbor or something. So no, I definitely agree with that. So does that really help the faith formation out a lot? Or does it hurt it? How does that really change with the revival? How does that really change the whole faith formation dynamic?
Definitely cut some work out for us, bringing people to the faith. But I think that would kind of help. So I think the realism, the authenticity too. The other thing I think we need to be aware of with that, whether or not it's in the top 2 or 5 or 10% or in the country. I mean, either way, I think it's something to be aware of no matter where you are, is that the enemy is going to do what he can to help you with your pleasure or to help pull you to that direction short term. But the idea is Christ, his love, his eternal salvation is long term. And there's something in a person's heart or in the way they act or in their morals, just in their being, when they have that joy, if you want to call it that, or that happiness. And there's something more to that than just that pleasure. That's just short term. But there's also that lingering after effect or aftermath that comes from that down feeling, the depression or the anxiety or whatever that is, those feelings that come from that, where a person who is living their faith and is faithful and they have a sense of joy, even if maybe life isn't going their way, there's still something about them that they're still happy. I don't want to say happy about the struggles that they're going through, but there's still a presence about them that they are just more of a positive person to be around. And I think we need to be aware of that with, especially, I guess, if that's the case with the diocese. I mean, that's kind of scary stuff. But it's something to be aware of that, myself, or even you being a young adult, with working or being with kids and around kids and stuff like that, being that authentic person to them, to help them and to give them some of those answers to those questions and those struggles and some of those things that maybe they don't know how to ask.
He said that was the men's conference for the Diocese of St. Cloud back in February of this year, and it was like, wait, what? And it was talked about a lot the rest of the day. It was like, oh, really? But yeah, and like you said, little kids don't know how to ask, and parents don't really know how to say it. But yeah, finding that way to that's for sure. So I'm going to take a little quick break. We're going to do a commercial for everyone watching. Make sure you turn on to your screen. We'll give Tony a breather. And we'll be right back in about 15 seconds after this advertisement from Jay Taylor. All right. Thanks again for Jay Taylor for, again, helping out so much with just the podcast and just helping me out a lot. So really appreciate. Go make sure to call him if you need anything with your just safety reasons for your equipment. So he knows his equipment, that's for sure. So Tony, what would you say? Kind of taking a little different approach now. What would you say if someone came up to you and told you, if you asked them, because I've been asked before, but they're not qualifying for faith formation to teach it? Because, I think it was one or two people at my parish are like, I don't know if I'm really qualified, but I've given them material and we have a good, we do it. What would you say if, looking for information people coming up in this next year, what would you say if they're not qualifying?
I think in general, I go back to a saying that I had heard years ago, and I continue to go back to it for just different times in my life, different things. God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. And I think it's those times, it's those moments. It's just, if you're feeling something, there's a time where you just feel pulled, or there's some kind of sense that you could help with this or you could do that. And I think that's the Holy Spirit just pulling you in that direction and wanting you to be there and to do something about it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like a catechist. You don't have to be a theologian or, studied scripture for years or decades or whatever. Sometimes it's just you coming into that space and just being real to some kids or, to some peers or whatever the case is, depending on the situation or wherever that you're being called to. But sometimes it's being authentic again and being real with those around you, that it's just giving maybe a testimony or just being open enough to talk about the faith or just share something about yourself. And I think as Catholics, we haven't done a good job of evangelizing and giving our personal testimony or our personal experience with God. And I think that's something that we need to share and we need to get better at with others. I think not just in the church, not just on Sundays in the pews amongst each other. It's something we need to take beyond the walls of the church. We need to be doing that in our workplaces. We need to be doing that in school. We need to be doing that in restaurants. I mean, for an example, when I go out with my family or whatever, it doesn't matter where we are. We will say a before meal prayer. Whether or not people have pointed at us or whatever, that doesn't matter to me, but it's something that I've picked up on when I see other people doing it, that's kind of cool. But to me, it's just being bold enough in your faith to do that. And I guess back to the original question about being asked to be a catechist, I've been in that situation where I don't feel that I'm enough. I don't feel that I know anything, but through the process of what I was doing, I was asked to be a small group leader with some high school kids or middle school kids. And I thought that I knew enough about the faith that I could fool these kids or whatever in a small group conversation. But what was cool about that and me answering and saying yes to that, I got more than I expected because through that process, these kids were asking me questions and stuff that I didn't necessarily know the answers to or didn't have enough of what I felt was the answer to these questions. So they actually helped drive me to take more of an ownership of my faith and to look into some of these questions that they had and just be more involved in my faith and be more intentional about it and just dive deeper into it. So that wasn't part of what I was planning to do when I said yes, but that's definitely where it came. And then, through that, not to get into my whole story or anything like that, but then, it was a few short months after that. There was a lot more that went on with that, but then I was doing youth ministry and I was actually leading some of these kids. And if you had asked me if that was going to be the plan or if I saw myself doing that in a few months, I would have had some words for you, but it definitely changes. And it's just one of those things that you don't know where God is going to take you or where he's going to lead you. And it doesn't matter. We all have our own stories. We all have our own different situations, but it's just being open enough to that call. And again, like I said, God doesn't equip the called, or he equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped. And that's the idea, is that we don't know what God has in store for us. And like you said in the intro with me, I'm passionate about it. I love working with kids and being with kids and just helping others deepen their faith and helping them. And I'm by no means any theologian or anybody who knows a lot about the faith or anything like that, but it's really cool to help people and kids. That's where I have a lot more of my experience, but to help people connect those dots and have those aha moments where, things all of a sudden click for them. And then, like yourself with going to Steubenville and stuff, for those kids to be able to have those experiences and see that joy. And another thing that I think you guys talked about when we were going to Steubenville is being on that Jesus high. When you're with 1,500, 2,000 other people in an auditorium or whatever, doing praise and worship or, experiencing Christ's presence in adoration, just that joy that you have there, that you can't take that from somebody. It's that and as a whole, you guys having that, and as a group, sharing that with each other. And I mean, to me, it's those moments that are, it's those things, but we don't know where God is calling us or what he's calling us to do. I think, so I think you're having me get more into my actual personal story that I had planned. No, that's okay. That's okay. I won't go into a lot of the details, but I being raised as a cradle Catholic, growing up as in my family or whatever, it was more of the things of just checking the boxes. We would just go to church. We would just, do the things, Sunday masses, the holy days. I mean, we did those things, participate in some of the church events and stuff throughout the year, just kind of being there. But I think like what we were talking about before coming on was just kind of taking some of those things for granted. We didn't really think of those things. We just did it. And I know that I lived that. We did that. I did that, but it wasn't until I got older, that I actually took ownership of my faith and wanted more from it. I started asking questions about, my faith. Why do we do this? Why do we have the traditions we have? Why do we do that? Well, and I got answered with the question, or with the statement that, well, that's the way we did it as kids. Like, well, that really doesn't give me any depth behind why we're doing it. I mean, it's just, okay, well, that's what you did, but didn't you ask those questions too? I mean, how long have we been doing this? Why are we doing it this way? Where I think as like a convert who has seen other things and has been and experienced different pools, if you will, or different waters, they have those experiences that they're bringing into our pool, into our waters, and they have a different perspective on some of that stuff that we don't necessarily have. And I think that helps them gain a different perspective, but helps them with more of the formation that they have, where they're more accepting of it, or they're more wanting it. There's more of a longing for it, where sometimes, like with us that have been cradle Catholics, it's just something that's just, like I said, my parents told me that's just the way we do it, or that's just tradition. Where, some of those traditions and stuff have been more explained to converts and stuff. And when they've come in to the Catholic faith after a time of being somewhere else and they want more, there's a longing for that, where we just kind of take it for granted that, well, it's just kind of, it's always been there. It's just something we do on Sundays. So I think that has a lot to do with it, with their perspective on how, and that experience of what they bring.
I mean, I think going back to like what we started the show with doing that curriculum, content that UACC is starting to do, kind of gives you more a deep dive into that, because like I say, cradle Catholics were taught this way in this sense, and it's kind of like, why wasn't that taught to everyone else? And I mean, yeah, it's just the way we did as kids, but I don't know. Like you said, didn't you ask the same questions, or at least think of them? But not trying to speak bad on your parents or anything, but a lot of people have that. So it is kind of like, yeah, the cradle Catholics hear it from the outside, and they kind of dive into it, and they hear it from almost a different approach to some degree. And as cradle Catholics, we just kind of go with the flow. Maybe that's why they asked if you're a cradle Catholic or not. I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying. So to wrap up the show, Tony, I'll ask you this final question: is that I'm just gonna say it like it is. So you can do whatever you want with this question. But I mean, as I've heard, we don't have a priest shortage, but everyone talks about a priest shortage. So with less churches, because of especially in the St. Cloud Diocese, all things new churches are closing, and they are claiming it's less priests, and there's less priests throughout the whole country, throughout the whole world. Would a nationwide or even a worldwide faith formation, Christ-centered faith formation, bring up more clergy in the congregation? I'll let you have a crack at that one.
So I mean, our diocese, we're dealing with this, all things new is what they're calling it, and just the process of like transitioning from It's 130 some churches down to 48 or 40, something like that. I mean, so a drastic number, closing churches, consolidating parishes, those kinds of things. There are parishes or dioceses around the country that are further into this than we are. There have been, some of them are further along, some of them aren't as far along, but it is something that is true. I think looking back, I don't think it's just a priest shortage. I think it's a Catholic shortage. And before we come on, you and I had talked about that. To me, I look at it as a ratio. When you don't have as many people coming, you're not going to have as many people that are choosing to discern the religious life. And when you don't have as many people to pick from, obviously there's going to be less that are coming out of that. But the other thing too is I think it goes back to like what we were talking about with the curriculum and us as Catholics being more authentic in our faith. And I think we need to be more authentic with how our faith is. And I think our society and as a whole has just gotten too busy. There's too many things going on. There's, the football game on, or I'd rather sit and do this, or, Fortnite or Minecraft, or just these other things that I feel more drawn to this, or I get more out of this. But rather than just going to church. But I think, and this is what I'm hoping with our faith formation program too, the authenticity coming out of it, developing a relationship with Christ, and developing and having that longing to develop that relationship rather than just having a relationship. But I mean, and I pose this to the kids, in faith formation, and I mean, I even can pose it to you. How do you have a relationship, whether it be with your best friend, whether it be with your wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, your kids, whoever it is, when you have, a best friend or, a spouse or whatever the case is, how do you develop that relationship? That relationship just isn't formed overnight, just at the snap of a finger. That is something you have to work at. That's something, you communicate with each other, you develop, different things, you go through different things together. And that's the same thing I talk about with some of the kids, in youth ministry and faith formation and stuff like that. It's developing that faith and that relationship with Christ. And I think as Catholics, we've gotten away from that with how our faith has been. We haven't been good at helping each other and being there for each other to experience the faith, to call people back to the church, to help fill the pews. People are just kind of falling away, but we're just kind of letting them fall away. We're not doing anything about it. I mean, Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2. There was a reason for it being 2 by 2. It wasn't just to go out to be alone, to be scattered, but it was to help support each other. It was there to be for each other, to be that support when one may be weak, the other could be strong, and just, kind of playing off each other and using that. And I think we need to do that as Catholics. And I think that will help. And that's part of our problem with Catholics that are falling away, or, that haven't developed the faith. And even for our priests, we need to help them. We need to support them. We need to be there together, because as a whole, we are the body of Christ. We aren't just the legs or the feet or the hands or whatever. I mean, it's all of those pieces working together to be the body of Christ as a whole. And I think we need to do that. We need to do a better job of doing that in our churches and as a Catholic community.
I would agree, especially with the helping our priests, because, I mean, sometimes it can be lonely, and sometimes there's a lot. Of course, everyone talks about scandals and stuff, and that's a whole different show. But yeah, it's supporting your priests, because they're making a huge sacrifice to be there for us. And like you said, we're all one body. We're many parts, but we're all one body. And I do like what you said too about the disciples. Like, I never thought of that way with 2 of them. Makes sense, because it's better to have someone else who has your back in a crowd than just yourself. Um, the crowd might react different if there's two of you instead of one. If it's just you, they might try to stone you or something. I'm not saying that with two, they could do that as well, but with two, they might have a different approach to it. So whether that's school, whether that's work, if you have a coworker or a classmate who is Catholic as well, make sure you're being around that person as well. Tony, any last words before we sign off today? If you don't, that's okay. But I know you must. I think you have something.
I do actually. I just what you said about finding somebody at work or something like that. I actually have a story. Good friend of mine. Shout out to Clayton. Him and I were that for each other. We were two guys that happened to be working together. He was my lead at work, and him and I didn't have much of a relationship. I mean, we did, but as we each were growing in our faith, it was something that developed between the two of us, where one of us would read something or hear something or whatever, and we'd bring it back to the other one. We would work together like that. And so then we were reading stuff together and just like talking about different things and strengthening each other's faith. And him and I mean, like, oh my gosh, it's awesome to have somebody like that. But there again, talking the 2x2, I mean, it was him and I that, we had each other's back. We talked about things, and actually, without advertising it or anything, it was one of those things where at work, we had people that would come back and actually ask us to pray for them, intentions and stuff like that, just because it's, like I said, we weren't advertising. It was just, there was something about us, the way we were, the way we carried on with each other, that other people saw, and other people just, maybe they weren't ready to deepen their faith, or, maybe they didn't know what it was or how to ask those questions, but they would come back and ask us for different things like that, like praying for them and stuff. And so it was just one of those things. And this was before I was doing any kind of ministry or anything like that, but it was in the time when I was taking ownership of my faith that just helped develop that. And so somebody like that, to be able to talk about different things, to have ideas, just conversations, that's huge. And look at it like anybody who works out or does any kind of weightlifting or whatever. You have a spotter, and you have a spotter for a reason. It's somebody to help encourage you, not necessarily to do the work for you or anything like that, but to help you and to encourage you, and who has your back. Maybe you put too much weight on, you can't do this, but they're there to help you out of that jam. It's the same kind of thing. Something important in life is just helping and encouraging each other. And that's huge, no matter what it is in life, especially the faith. So I guess to be a little long-winded as far as the last thing is, pray for each other, be there for each other, just kind of help, be bold in your faith, in a world where we have so much going on that isn't real, or you're questioning things that are fake. Just on the way up here, I was actually listening to Father Mike Schmitz talk about AI and the Pope's encyclical about AI, and how fake some of that stuff is and how it's being used and all these things. There's so much in our world now that we question, and I mean, there's just so much of that. So I encourage you all to just be real in your faith, be bold in your faith, and be real about it, and let your actions speak louder than your words.
Tony, again, I appreciate you driving up to come on the show today, making the time and effort, taking your time away from family. I know it's summertime, and it's you could be doing something else with them. So I appreciate your time tonight, and we'll have you back on again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the invite a second time. And I'm happy to help. I'm glad that we've stayed in touch after all this time too. And yeah, absolutely.
And again, make sure you share this episode, because there's probably other people out there who need to hear this, and other ACCs, other parishes, especially those who are struggling to build up the faith formation community in their area. So stay in the state of grace, go to the sacraments.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Catholic Table Talk podcast, where everything Catholic is on the table. Don't forget to subscribe to Catholic Table Talk on your favorite podcast platform to get new episodes delivered directly to you every Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern.